Thank you for joining the session. Those of you who are watching, I can see we've got a few people watching us now. Slightly surreal experience because we can't see anyone, but you can see us. So do that. I believe that most of you will have just watched the presentation where we were asked to present 3 key statistics, and I'm hoping that you come here to find out a bit more about audience behaviour within the music sector as affected by COVID and the lockdowns. So for those of you who didn't watch the presentation but have just come here on set, my name is G. Davey. I'm the Head of Legal and Business Affairs for the trade body called the Association of Independent Music, otherwise known as AIM. I know there's a few AIM acronyms for various things, including one that's used at this conference, but when I say AIM, I'm talking about the Association of Independent Music. So I'm joined here by Simon Wheeler, whose current role, I believe, the title is the Global Director of Commercial Strategy for Beggars Group. Is that right, Simon?
Yeah, snappy, eh?
Yeah, you've had a few titles since I've known you, so I believe that's the current one. So I felt that Simon was just fantastically placed to come and talk to you all and talk to me today, because he has had such a broad-ranging role in particularly online or digital music consumption. And of course, a lot of the big stories around COVID and lockdown have been about the digital landscape and about live events and retail and everything else pretty much moving online, so that we are now all online and currently all consuming music online. So before we kick off, I wonder, Simon, if you could just say a little about Beggars and about your role there, and possibly a little bit about your background, which I know you've been instrumental in the area of digital music. So far away.
Oh, hi. My name's Simon Wheeler. I work for the Beggars Group of independent labels. It's a group of 5 labels based out of London and New York. The label brands are 4AD, Rough Trade, Matador, XL Recordings and Young Turks, working with artists such as Radiohead and Adele at the top end of things, the XX, the National, Grimes, and a catalogue going back 40 years. My role was essentially running and developing our digital business, and I've been doing that in the digital part of the world since about sort of mid to late 90s, about 96. So definitely going back some time. We've been fairly fortunate on the recorded music side of things in the music business, in that our key revenue streams are streaming and purchasing of music, and that has continued during the COVID situation, and it's fairly robust. So we've got a lot to feel thankful for, whereas we see a lot of our colleagues and peers in other parts of the music business, and particularly in live and event space, which has seen their incomes decimated or sort of reduced to zero overnight. So we've taken our fortune, if you like, and responsibility very seriously, and Beggars has been looking to see where it can provide help, both through a fund which AIM has created, and we work very closely with them to try and provide income and support, through to the teams behind the artists. There's a huge amount of people involved in the payment business as a whole, and I think it's the people behind the scenes which really need the most support. They're not the ones which people know about, they're not the ones which people think about so much, but without those, the show would definitely not go on, the venues. So we're really invested in trying to help the music ecosystem in whatever way we can. We have a place in it, but without the entire ecosystem functioning, then none of us can really do the work which we need to, and we can't support the artists in the way that we truly want to as well. So I think that's maybe one of the first takeaways of this time, is I think it makes everyone reflect on their position in the space and sort of realise that it is a true ecosystem with everyone working together, which is what makes it truly successful, rather than individual companies, however well you may maybe do it. So I think that realisation has been a really important factor factor for beggars here.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I mean, really well said. But I think one of the aspects of this conference, I know, is to look at. I mean, I know today is focused on divergence and how things have changed, but I know that the overall theme looks more widely at, how the different parts of the creative sector can look to build back better. And I think the commitment that Beggars has shown in helping and driving AIM to set up a COVID hardship fund, which is what Simon was referring to help freelancers and contractors who were overlooked and who are really part of that fabric of the music landscape, to make sure that we can build back, that those people are still there, and that we can all come back better and stronger. So a little bit about AIM. So AIM is the trade body that represents the independent side of the music business. So largely when it was founded 20 years ago, that was a focus on record labels, independent record labels. Since then, the focus has broadened somewhat with the business landscape and the business activities of record labels broadening somewhat. But AIM stands to represent the independent music sector, and that's really the vast breadth of music that's released in 2020 and beyond. So at this point, I should invite the audience who are watching to ask us any questions either about the statistics that I raised in the presentation, or as we go along, feel free to ask about any aspects of how lockdown's affected music or how the audience behaviours have changed across lockdown. So do just chime in. You can use the Spaces chat. So if you click on the chat, you'll see different levels of chat, and you click on Spaces and you can use that, or you can direct message me. You can put an @ symbol in front of my name, or you can find me in the directory listing and direct message me that way. So while we're waiting for questions, I've got a few points that I wanted to pick up on with Simon. I'm going to try and make him do most of the talking, in fact. So I suppose it's just really to say that the fundamental thing that lockdowns have shown me is how much of an appetite there is for music. So I think I touched upon this in my presentation, that despite all the upheaval, and as Simon says, in some cases, really severe hardship within the sector, some parts have travelled through more unscathed than others, but I think we've all been affected, we've all been shaken, and there have been some revolutionary changes. But despite all that upheaval, I think there is clearly a resilient audience, and a resilient audience that is willing and happy, at least for now, to pay for music. And it's interesting to explore that a little bit more. We've seen really high levels of engagement with new tools and platforms, and different demographics coming online, different audiences coming online, and interacting with music in different ways. And realistically, I think something that Simon said to me in one of our kind of preparatory emails is that everyone is online, shopping and consuming and connecting globally, and that's really going to fundamentally change things going forward. So really starting with, I suppose we'll start with the key statistic that I had in my presentation which is about live streaming. Just to ask you, Simon, from the perspective within Beggars and the perspective of the landscape as you see it, how did live streaming look a year ago for Beggars artists, and has that changed across lockdown, and what's the outlook going into?
Well, I mean, live streaming isn't, is far from a new concept. I mean, we've been dealing with our artists doing live streams since probably like the early 2000s in a very, very primitive form. Probably over about the last 5, 6, 7 years, it's become such a level that we actually employ someone whose primary role is to manage our role and manage our rights in the live streaming and the webcasting space. So it's always been there. Well, it's been there for quite a long time, but it's always been something which has kind of been tacked on to what people do, whether that's a festival wanting to live stream themselves, to varying degrees of success, whether it's a show, whether it's a brand show, whether it's a TV performance, whether it's a radio performance. There's lots of different ways where where people have been streaming, but it's very much a secondary thing, and no one was really taking too much notice of it, I'm being honest, outside of, you know, maybe the tentpole events. Coke is a huge American festival, and they get some serious numbers, and that really did seem to create an impact, or sort of like the equivalent of Glastonbury here, I guess, would be the same. If you get a good slot at one of those festivals and you were streamed, then you could definitely see the knock-on, you know, effect. Equally, if you were on at 2 o'clock in the afternoon on one of the small stages, then, you know, you may well be streamed, but that's not necessarily going to have the impact. So I think a lot of artists and managers saw that as something that they kind of had to tick the box to say okay to when they were doing their festival performances or whatever engagement they were doing. But no one was truly taking it seriously, you know, apart from those few, you know, real sort of key events. So I think what's happened now is that it's now become front and center for everyone. It's like, okay, we can't go out and play as we would, but we still want to connect with our audience. As artists, we still, you know, have creativity. We still want to perform. You know, we still want to have that engagement. So it's definitely changed in that aspect, and I don't think that's something which is going to go back in the bottle as we exit the COVID sort of situation. How much that's going to become part of people's lives or not, you know, it's not going to go back to where it was. It's not going to stay where it is now. You know, whereabouts in that middle period, you know, will it end up? And I think that's part of what we're all going to find out.
Yeah, I think certainly one of the topics of discussion at AIM's Digital Committee, which Simon sits on, has been around the proliferation of services that make live streaming available, and the quality that is seeing a pickup. Is that
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of companies who have kind of popped up, if you like, in this, taking, you know, sense an opportunity out of every bad situation. There's always going to be some opportunities to create something new and interesting. There's people who've been pivoting who are kind of maybe in a related area and could see their opportunity into this, and, you know, and I think that's interesting. Part of what we've been working on with our artists is trying to create a high quality experience, not just in the audio and the visual, which is important, but actually the show itself. When the first lockdown happened, we were seeing everyone, you know, singer-songwriters, you know, guitar in the kitchen, you know, in the living room, in the bathroom, because it had some nice echo and reverb. You know, people were just doing what they could, and it was very spontaneous. It was very just make something happen. There was some quite significant, you know, impacts with people doing fundraiser, particularly in that early period. But it was very raw and it was very primitive, and I think that was fine for where it was. But after a period of time, there's only so many songwriters you can see in their kitchen, however good they are, that you become, well, I've kind of seen a few of these. And when you go and watch an artist play, you know, it's not just a person, a set of people on a stage and nothing. There's the production, there's the lights, there's the stage design, there's the, you know, the whole show, the projection of the show and what goes into it. And I think certainly a lot of the artists which we work with felt if they were going to put on a show for their artists, whether that's, you know, live streamed online or whether it's in real life, they want to give their fans something which is really meaningful, which projects, you know, them, their creativity, their art, you know, in the best possible light, rather than just being, well, I can play my guitar or whatever instrument it is in my kitchen, but that's really not who I am as an artist, and it's not what I want to project, and it's not what my fans want to see. So I think, you know, and you can't instantaneously create a production overnight, which is going to be a great live streamed experience. You know, you can't turn on a sixpence and do that. That takes some planning, it takes resource, it takes the production team, it takes the lighting design. I think all of these people to come together to create that, you know, hour or however long it is, you know, experience where you can have that experience of watching an artist which you love perform. And you know, that's been something which has taken some time, but it's happened. We're seeing higher quality performances coming out on a range of different levels, so we should talk a bit about that as well. But you know, it's truly inspiring to see what people can do when you're put in a situation where a lot of things are cut off. Okay, well, what can I do? And I've seen some fantastic shows.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing some questions that are coming in, and I'm going to try and cunningly weave them into the conversation that we're kind of already having, because they're along the lines of what I want to talk about anyway. Someone who was talking about missing the collaborative experience of a live show, and I just wondered whether that really feeds into what you were saying about the creativity. One of the areas that AIM looks at through the year, we usually hold an in-person independent music awards, and this year, because of lockdown, we couldn't hold it in person. So we looked at how we could creatively pivot that to an online experience. And as you say, it wasn't just let's have some artists play on a Zoom link. And, what we wanted to do was really look at the audience experience. And I think this is something that's really reflected across the music landscape of how we're seeing this uptick in live streaming develop and the creativity around it. What we ended up doing at AIM was having a multi-platform approach, so that the audience could engage with the awards, could either look at things on their app and send comments. They could watch it on screen via YouTube, and there were various touch points that the audience could engage with. I think we're seeing a bit of that, Simon, aren't we, with some of the live streaming that's happening now, some more creativity in the artists and some more engagement of audiences with artists. Can you talk a little bit about how you've experienced that?
It's going to be hard for an online experience to create that, visceral effect of being in a crowd, whether the loud music, but it's all encompassing around you when you're in the, in the live environment. So, but I think, and also these experiences, whether it's you're there with your friends, you're sharing a moment with people, or even if it's people you don't know that you're sharing a moment with, that's such a part of the live music experience. So trying to find some way of trying to bring that into the online experience has been pretty challenging. But people have been trying. So there's been a number of things. What's the more interesting thing that we've seen? I think something like the Glass Animals live stream, which they did, is on a platform. There was a lot of chat type of functionality on the side and interaction. However, I think what people didn't realise was while you've got all that interaction going on, that was taking a lot of processing power, which is part of the same platform that the live stream is going on, and it seemed like it was the interaction part which was stopping the live stream from running smoothly and actually pulled it down. When Billie Eilish did her show, and that's probably like one of the biggest productions that's been around, they actually cut off the live chat after 15 minutes, roughly, something like that, very early on in the stream, because it was interrupting it, and basically took away all that interactivity because it was conflicting with the live stream itself, happening on the same platform. So, in some ways, that's showing that consumers, the fans, really want that interaction. It's not just sitting there and staring at a stream or listening to the stream or, whatever you're doing. Sure, that's part of it. It's got to look good. It's got to sound good. But actually, they truly, truly want that participation. They want to be the equivalent of being down the front, looking at the artist and going, it's me, notice me, I'm here, I'm watching you, So it's, but that's so important in that sort of like that fan artist interaction. So that was something which I found truly interesting. Even watching things on, just on YouTube, kind of like replayed shows. I think Radiohead did a series of shows which we were involved with, and the audience reaction through that and the discussion. There's obviously groups of people which have seen Radiohead a lot of times, have got a lot of stuff in common, and that just for a very relatively simple chat process, having that interaction, repeated themes. It was like a show a week. So there's this, similar people doing similar themes, and trying to create some of that social bonding, which is so important around these shows. So I think that's been one of the standouts for me, is that how much people want that social interaction.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen the same across the AIM Awards and across a vast swathe of people reporting into us from across the independent music sector. And I think one of the things that I was most proud of with the independent sector was the way that the independent record labels maintained their releases across lockdown, that they didn't hold back on releases, that they didn't wait for that physical moment to happen, that there was a real embracing of technology and embracing of platforms, even when, as you say, there were on occasion some technical issues and some other issues with interacting. You know, a lot of these platforms are new. Many of them have different models than the industry is used to, and there is some friction there between, you know, making things work, working out a way that everyone, you know, is treated properly, and making sure as well that the fans have access to music and are properly engaged with the artist. Thinking about some of those kind of points where it either didn't quite work or there's been difficulties, I wonder what you think live streaming platforms can do, or just, you know, new online tools can do to make sure that this is something sustainable going forward.
I mean, they've clearly got to sort out the, you know, the processing power and bandwidth to be able to deal with, you know, hundreds of thousands, you know, potentially even millions of people having a good experience and being able to interact. You know, the shows which are on Fortnite are some of the biggest kind of like live stream experiences. And they're, you know, Fortnite's a world which is created to deal with millions of concurrent players at the same time interacting. So I think they've got a bit of a head start there, but you know, it wasn't the same as a live stream. It's a very different, you know, enhanced experience, which could only have happened online. You know, the Travis Scott show, if you've seen that, could not have happened in real life. You know, so it truly was an artifact of our, you know, of our 100% online life. And we're going to see more of these shows which have taken advantage of being digital, which have taken advantage of being online to do things which you couldn't do in real time. I mean, I think the Travis Scott, you know, the Billie Eilish, the BTS, these are your sort of like the, you know, the flagpole events. They've got budgets of millions of dollars behind them. I mean, that's for the rarefied, you know, artists right at the top of the tree. But you don't really need that. I mean, sure, it's nice to have the big budgets, but to create something cool and interesting, you don't have to have the massive budgets to be able to do things. You know, people who are digital natives taking advantage of like the virtual backgrounds within kind of video apps to make a really interesting live performance. We've got an artist called Yeji. She's sort of Korean, American. She's very influenced by anime culture. She's very into games and creativity, digital creativity. And she did a session with Boiler Room. You know, Boiler Room have famously done very primitive, you know, just a camera above the DJ, and that's it. One camera doesn't move for the whole set. Yeji did her take on it, and it was from her, literally from her sofa, but using virtual backgrounds and AR tricks to be able to take people on a bit of a journey and make this small Korean American girl sat on a sofa playing her music and turn it into this sort of like anime cartoon type of experience. So I think I've got the link here somewhere which I can share for you, and you can go and have a look at it on YouTube afterwards. There, I mean, it's, you know, for me it was one of a really joyful, fun musical experience, you know, and it couldn't be further away, if you like, from the one camera above the DJ, but it just looks, you know, totally different eye candy. And I know that wasn't, you know, on a big budget, but it was with a creative set of friends putting that together. And I think that's what we need. I think digital natives who really kind of understand the medium, just aren't phased, aren't seeing it as something new or tricky or anything like that, just sees it as part of what we do. You know, and that's becoming more normalized and more mainstream, which I think can only open up, you know, the more lines of creativity we can open up, you know, the better. Maybe that leads to new forms of performance. Maybe that leads to new forms of music. You know, maybe that leads to new trends and styles, because I think out of, you know, as I said before, out of hardship become, you know, opportunities. And I think that's the same on the creativity side of things that it is on the business side of things as well.
Yeah, that was a real standout moment, I think, for me as well during the year. I think the other one I mentioned in my presentation with Phoebe Bridgers playing in Animal Crossing, which I just thought was the kind of cutest example I'd seen. But as you said, it's interesting looking at the demographics, because you're talking, very much about perhaps the younger people who are more au fait with, with the gaming culture. They're looking at these virtual experiences like Travis Scott, the BTS fans, these in-game things in Animal Crossing, and I know Minecraft has hosted virtual gigs as well. And those are kind of, to me, they're more expected. Okay, yes, an uptick, and I think that Twitch statistic I gave in my presentation showed the real surge that happened when the first lockdown was announced. But I wonder, when we're looking at a kind of wider cross section, as we say, everyone's really been pushed online, and certainly with things like Love Record Store, we've seen perhaps different audiences push online, or at least a wider audience pushed online. And I think, with this going on so long, it feels like that's going to be fairly habit forming. It's difficult to know at the moment, but certainly retail, independent retail, is looking incredibly healthy for this year, far more than anyone could have predicted. And I know that the Entertainment Retailers Association reported to me that actually the transition to mail order in retail had been very straightforward. They hadn't had to help too many of their members to make that transition. Many of them had already been there, and they're seeing a real, from the uptick of lockdown, they're seeing a real surge in the regionality of people buying music from independent record stores. So I think looking at the kind of extension of reach that we're getting with online retail, with live streaming, has that affected how the thinking is within Beggars about how you plan releases, or any of the interactions you're having with the consumer?
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly had a huge impact on how we do business. I think you said something in passing a few minutes ago, is that keeping the release schedule flowing, keeping the supply of new music into the market, we felt was really important, both to help support the retail environment, which, if they don't have new releases to get people into stores, is going to hurt them even more. But I mean, also for keeping the behaviour of kind of new music, in the minds of fans as well. So for us, it was pretty important that we didn't hold back releases once the first lockdown started, not unless we thought it was absolutely essential, for the artist. But I think there was only one release which got put back, and that was just such a elaborate physical product that we're having problem getting the sourcing and getting the manufacturing and getting it all together in time, so we actually wouldn't have a product to sell. Everything else we tried to make available on our schedule. Supporting independent retail was absolutely fundamental for us and our teams within the labels and within our distributor. And our retail partners have worked incredibly hard during this period. We were sourcing and manufacturing as much vinyl as we were doing campaigns with a lot of the retailers to be able to give them a way of showcasing to their users that there's music to be bought. We drove a huge amount of business for them and for us and for our artists for doing that. But it was a lot of hard work trying to get all of this sourced and delivered and made available, to the stores. Then the stores had to work out how they were, whether it's straight mail order, whether it's click and collect, that people could come and do curbside pickup. Everyone's having to change the way that they were thinking about, delivering music and selling music to fans through that. And the numbers show that all of that work's paid off. I mean, we thought we were going to be down, as a business, we're going to be down at least 30%, particularly on the physical side of things. And so far we've still got a way to go. It's looking that that's it's going to be nowhere near that, which is fantastic for everyone. However, having said that, there's a lot missing from how we would have taken a new record out or a new artist out to the public. There's that, without live music, which is kind of like the cornerstone of what what we do and the artists that we work with. Without that being in place, everyone had to be creative about how we could take that message out there, how we could reach the fans, how we could tell them what we're doing, how we can get them excited about the music, that the artists are putting out without having that live experience in place. So lots of live streaming has been going on. We're trying to find other ways of trying to, creative online events, obviously a lot of use of socials, that was all there, but we can't just concentrate on what we were doing before and leave this big gap, because it's such a huge gap in what we're doing. So it's all full appreciation to everyone that's pulled together to try and to keep retail going and to try and keep these campaigns working and try and keep the records out. And I've got so much appreciation for everyone that's put in the very, very long hours and days to trying to make this happen and keep things going. It's very important to us.
Yeah, same. Just so much appreciation for people who kept the music getting out there. And I think it's easy to forget. There's a lot of big headlines at the moment about streaming, and there's a lot of big headlines about how much income has been lost through live shutting down, effectively. That it's easy to forget that this is the kind of activity that keeps that money flowing through, not only to artists who are currently out there, but to ensuring that there's a future, that there are new signings, and that more music can get out there, and further creativity can emerge out of this pandemic. So I think that's it's something really worth pointing out.
Yeah.
Just thinking about kind of new music, and I'm just wondering whether any of these changes are affecting the kinds of music that, say, Beggars is likely to sign, or that booking agents are likely to work with. Do you think artists are going to have to be more kind of live streaming friendly, or more easy, find it easier to engage with their audiences going forward? Or do you think the industry will mediate that relationship?
Well, I think sort of A&R and signing and new artists and development is much more sort of like a medium to longer term impact. But if the main way that you're finding new artists, which for a lot of our labels, is it the main way? But it's certainly a very, very important way. Is to see people live, to see how they connect with their audience, to see what they're really like in person. If that's been taken away, then and you're looking at music from a different angle from what you can experience online or consume in other ways, then it may well affect what people are going to sign. I don't think that's become apparent or too apparent particularly, but clearly, if you can't go down to your local venue and see, a band, a 5-piece band playing, then you're going to be looking at other types of music. So, and it's very hard for like a 5-piece band to get together and do sort of like live streaming unless you're getting into the bigger budget sort of side of things, with the whole production, the setup, being able to mic that and be able to stream that in a quality way. So I think it could well present some changes. It's just that it's a bit early for us to be able to see that right now. And equal with the people that may come out and shine, again, they're unlikely to be the band which you would have seen before, because again, it's very hard to translate that online. So you're going to get a different type of audience. And so going back to Yeji, the link that I shared, she's definitely someone who's kind of like seems to feel really at home and comfortable in this environment. Before she'd done some DJing, I don't think she'd actually done sort of live performances. So it seems to work better for some artists than for others, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, you're speculating, but given your long experience in the industry, I expect your prophecies will be a little bit more accurate than perhaps some of the ones I gave in my presentation, which are a little bit more speculative. But it's really useful to see how that might look as we move forward. And as you say, we won't really know until we see the trends develop over time. I think lockdown's a little bit too quick in itself to know whether these are really lasting effects. I can see some of the questions though asking, bringing me back down to earth and back down to the present really. looking back at different demographics. I've mentioned this a few times in my presentation, and I'm wondering whether the reality bears out. So Simon, this is something you can help me with. I know that we've talked about some of the changes in consumption, so looking more perhaps to streaming and retail, and thinking about the genres which seem to be seeing an uptick at the moment. I know we've talked about a shift to kids repertoire and some of the other changes around what people are requesting and looking for and buying. What are
well,
those
I think
changes as you see
it's kind of interesting. The consumption of streaming services is a bit of a reflection of what at any period of time, and that's certainly been the case, through the COVID situation. From the very first part of lockdown, the consumption, and I'm talking from a music streaming services perspective here. So I can't really talk about Netflix or anything like that, but from a music perspective, the initial reaction, in each country as different lockdowns hit at different periods of time, or the effect was felt in different periods of time, then the initial consumption of music just dropped off. We think that people were listening to, radio and news, particularly a lot more, worried about what was going on. I don't think there was so much like the soundtrack that was happening, what it was before. When people were listening, there was very heavy peaks on, commuting periods, for instance. That went away as lockdown hit. So that was a real change in people's behaviour. And then that sort of like the weekday versus weekend shift has also changed. So that was the first change, that's the hit, but it didn't take too long before music consumption sort of rose to, roughly where it was before. Took a bit of a bump in different places. But then you saw the real shift of people, working from home, enforced being at home, the whole family at home, kids at home. So yes, kids music, you've got parents trying to work, you've got kids at home, distracted. Kids music consumption on streaming services, whether that was an audio streaming service or a service like YouTube, absolutely went through the roof, as you were seeing the sort of like the need to entertain children at home, for so many people while they were trying to do their job and juggle everything at the same time. That was really, really apparent. I mean, not that we were working in sort of children's music, but you see that impact on the marketplace. And when you're in a subscription business, it's kind of a zero-sum game. If someone wins, someone else has to lose. There is 10 in the pot, if you like, per person. And as that consumption shifts, there's still only 10 in the pot. So if you have a ton more consumption, there's still only 10 in the pot. If children's music consumes 20% more, then the rest of the pot is going to be receiving, effectively 20% less. So these changes are really important in the dynamic of today's music industry anyway. Once we come through and it started to get normalized, if that's the word, the new normal, or however we're going to put it, we did see, which has impacted more on our business, we've seen a lot more consumption of, I suppose, what you could call audio comfort food. It's those, maybe going back into the catalogue, it's the music or artists which you've known well and you've known for a long time. Maybe you've got the more time to revisit these things. Maybe that's part of the equation. We don't know exactly all of the, all of the levers and the mechanics, but I think probably, you're not going out and going to shows or going to restaurants or going to the theatre or art galleries or museums, which you do in a city. So maybe you do have more time to be going back through and go, I haven't listened to this, I haven't listened to this, time at home, time to relax in the evening. I think that ties in with consumption of vinyl purchasing, which we've just been talking about, and particularly in independent retail. And we've seen people maybe plugging the gaps in their collection, which they thought, well, I've never really got round to buying these things, but I can now, again, and maybe I'm not going out and spending the money. So we think there's a part of that going on as well, which has been kind of interesting. Catalogue consumption overall has continued to grow through all of this period, and by catalogue consumption, that's in our mind that's over 5 years old catalogue. So it depends on people's definitions, but I think it's definitely indicated to me that music is, it's a cliche, but it's that soundtrack to your life. It is whatever situation you're in, whether it's good, bad, or sort of indifferent. Then music for a lot of people is important. It can provide you with that bit of comfort. It can be that reassuring sort of like hug through your ears sometimes that actually whatever else is going on in the world, you've got either someone that helps you express how you feel or that can take you away from it. And that kind of importance for music in our culture and in people's lives is really pretty inspiring. But I think it's part of what got most of us into this business to start with, to be honest. And I think we're seeing that on the streaming services side as well, where subscriptions are continuing to grow so far. It's hard to say whether that's really going to continue. If we get into more economic hardship, then that may well change. But so far, I think an audio subscription seems to be something which is showing its importance to people, and it's a relatively affordable luxury in these times. So hopefully that will continue, but there's no guarantee that it's going to.
Yeah, I wonder if you'll agree with me on the following. That I think with a lot of the upheaval we've seen in with lockdown, we've also of course seen the corresponding effect of people really focusing on what's important to them. And I think along with that, there's been a lot of focus of societal issues, on inequalities and injustices that people are observing. It's not that they've suddenly happened, it's just that perhaps people have had the time and space to think about them a bit more with lockdown. And also it's, as you say, it's kind of brought forward people's view of what's valuable to them. It seems that music is one of those things that is valuable to people. And also perhaps, I know when we discussed this before, you were talking about the emotional connection that people have with their music. And Wade, you talked earlier when we were talking about live streaming a great deal about the audience connection and how artists can work with that, and how the sector will have to. And certainly in the independent landscape, we've seen embracing of how that audience participation with artists grows. But I just wanted to focus on, because I know I've only got a short time left, one of the questions that came in that relates to this. Thinking about the kind of focus on social justice and the upsurge in interest of Black Lives Matter and other related social justice campaigns, I wonder if you're seeing any effect of that with what Beggars are doing, whether that's effective engagement or how your releases are playing out or anything else.
Well, yes. I mean, in amongst the COVID situation, we have, the huge impact of Black Lives Matter, and really raising the over sort of inequalities in a whole range of areas. And the music business is not excluded for that under any stretch of the imagination. I mean, the music business from a creative front has always been incredibly diverse, but it's not necessarily reflected that within the structure of the business itself, I think. And I think that's been something which is brewing for some time. It's certainly not a new issue, but it's something which has been brought front and center, and another thing which I think we all have responsibility to be able to deal with and make sure that we're operating as best we can, and making sure that there is sufficient diversity to reflect the music that we're working with. Beggars has always been a very thoughtful company and trying to make itself diverse and as equal as we possibly can do. But having said that, we are working in an area which, our sort of bedrock, if you like, is kind of indie rock, which kind of by definition is largely, white and male. And that is the music which we've, not always, but sort of like, focused on it, I guess, and therefore it's going to attract a certain amount of people. So and a certain type of person as well. So I think we've got good gender diversity within Beggars. I think we've worked very hard on that over a number of years, and we felt comfortable in that place for for some time. Do we have enough cultural diversity is the question that we're asking ourselves and have been asking, and our staff have been asking us as well. And there's been good dialogue between the staff and the management, and we're taking on extra resource to be able to focus on that and make sure as a company we're doing the very best that we can in this area. I mean, we're not a example of the entire music industry because of where we're working. We're certainly not an example of the entire country, for example, because we're a niche and a microcosm within that. But I think every company could do a bit better, and I think if anyone comes out and says yes, we're good at this, we've got it covered, they're probably missing one or two things at least. So I think it's a journey, and I think it's some work which we're absolutely invested in, and we've committed both management resource, time, and financial resource to be the best that we can be. We can't be something that we're not, and I think that's important. We don't want to lose the company culture, but we do think we can improve within that, and we know that it's not going to happen overnight. In a small or medium-sized company, you don't have the turnover of staff to go, actually, I want to get from here to here and I'm going to do it in a year, because that's just not feasible, and it's not desirable. But you've got a plan about how you're going to get there, and you've got a plan about what that route looks like and about the steps that you're going to take, and that's part of the journey which we're on at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as you know well, within AIM as an organisation and a community of independent music businesses, I think for many years there's been a focus on ensuring that there is diversity of musical styles of people that enter the industry, making sure that that continues. And I think the recent focus on social justice and looking at how music audiences react to music in that sense, as much as how society and news headlines may be reporting it, has been a very interesting journey. One of the changes we're making within AIM and the AIM community of independent music businesses is to create a whole new strata of membership and make sure that we are really speaking and accessing and feeding knowledge to and taking knowledge from the vast breadth of music entrepreneurs and musicians that are out in the world that perhaps weren't adequately represented already by the already reasonably diverse independent music community. So I suppose this session really focuses on audience behaviours, and certainly I think within the work that's being done within the independent music sector, there is perhaps an outreach to audiences and a focus on signings. And I'm just wondering whether there are any changes being made within Beggars, for example, as to how to engage with different audiences, or any changes to release plans or signings or anything like that in considering improvements in diversity.
Well, I mean, I think when it comes down to signings, your aim is to sign the best artists that you possibly can do. That's got to be the aim. I think when it comes down to diversity on the creative side of the industry, I mean, that's kind of been the industry's strong point more than anything else. I mean, I think that's where it absolutely excels. So within Beggars, again, we operate within a kind of niche of the business, if you like, although we're a lot more diverse than we ever have been. I think when I started, which was 30 years or so ago, it largely was skinny white guys with guitars, and that was kind of it, really. Whereas today's lineup of artists across our roster is as diverse from sure, we've got skinny white guys with guitars, but we've also got artists like Yeji, we've got artists like FKA Twigs, We've got artists, such as the XX. We've got Grimes. It truly is a far more diverse roster than we have had in the past. Could it be more diverse? Yes, but you don't want a roster where you're just ticking boxes. Everyone has got to be there on artistic merit and ability, and I think that's important. So for me, that's slightly less of a problem. I think it's more the infrastructure and the setup of the business itself, which needs a longer and a much harder look at itself, and quite rightly where I think most of the attention is. I think on the creative side, when you look at things like festival lineups, I think that's been something which, again, historically has come from, white blokes with guitars largely from the festival world. Could be a lot more diverse, and I think I've seen, I've seen a lot of criticism maybe about some lineups, which is still largely, male, guitars, white. So maybe there's more work to be done in those areas. It's not an area which I have a huge amount of expertise in, so I'm sure there's more work to be done. But from a beggars perspective and our labels and that type of approach to creativity, there's nothing that we're putting in place. But I think that everyone is casting their net a lot wider, if you like, nowadays than ever before. And frankly, it's possible now, because you don't need to be on the ground in a place going to see someone, as we've just been talking about, in the same way as you would have had to be 5 years ago or certainly more. So, and I think that's really healthy. One of our labels, Matador, they have signed African guitarist who is going to be a challenge, as they are kind of like Matador or indie rock stalwarts, if you like. But he's a blinding guitar player. Mdu Mokhtar is his name, and he's really exciting, and it's someone which is going to be different for us to work. So I think the idea that an American label based out of New York could be signing a African guitarist, and I'm trying to remember which country he comes from, and sadly I can't. So I'm not going to pretend and get it wrong. Is something which just wouldn't have happened, a number of years ago. So seeing XL, one of our more successful labels, has signed Arabic hip hop artist that we've just put out his first few tracks, and his EP is out at the end of this week. So I think in terms of that diversity of artists, I think that will go wherever the creativity is, and the creativity is happening in more places than ever before. So I think that's a brilliant and healthy thing, not just for the business, but for audiences as well.
Absolutely. I think that really speaks to kind of long-term audience change, as well as anything else does. That not only has lockdown changed the way that your existing artists are interacting, but you're still signing artists, and you're perhaps using different tools and different experiences, and the changes that we see around us to broaden your own signings. And I think I see that reflected certainly across the independent sector. It'll be interesting to know whether market leaders follow suit. But I think creativity has been the watchword for this session, and I think that's the thing that really will be the watchword for audience engagement with music and go into 2021. So as to whether things that have happened under lockdown last, as to whether we continue to see growth, which I think we will, that creativity seems really central to it all. So I think we're basically out of time. So I'm just going to say thank you, Simon, for joining me today, and thank you everyone for watching. I hope that was interesting, and do feel free to check out Beggars Group, of course, and also to have a look at what AIM's doing at aim.org.uk. And thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Thank you.